Good morning, everyone. Welcome to CloudFest Africa 1.0. My name is DREY, and I am here to discuss the future of AI, transformations, and possibilities. One thing that I have noticed about AI is that we have to put it through a lens of trust. We have to think about whether AI understood what we asked, whether AI did what we might do and either just come up with a story, or whether AI has been grounded in knowledge. Similar to a human being, if I asked you about something that you know little to nothing about, you have two or three choices, right? I could either say, I am sorry, I am not that familiar with this subject. I could go with what I've heard or what others have told me about the subject. And in that case, I'm probably taking that information that I've heard as truth. And then third is I could always make up a story. I could always go with something that is either partially or entirely fictitious. So if you ask me what I know about agriculture, well, my father was at DeKalb Ag Genetics. DeKalb Ag Research originally in DeKalb, Illinois, is where my father started his career. He studied agricultural business, and he worked for a seed corn company that made seed corn. Through genetic modification, or GMO, my father's company came up with ways to make seed corn that would be pest and potentially other diseases or things that could affect the corn, and genetically modified it so that the corn would either resist or deter those types of pests, insects, or different types of things that would affect the corn. When my father looked at the opportunities that the company had by just pulling the tassels, the way the corn actually develops, they had an opportunity even before genetically modifying to almost naturally modify the corn by deciding what corn plants they wanted to pollinate with other corn. In the natural ways of things going about, bees or other insects might be pollinating, or the tassels on the corn actually would pollinate based on wind and natural phenomenon. So these are different ways that I could answer and pretty much exhaust my understanding of agriculture or agricultural sciences. It's based on my father's information that was disseminated to me, and without much other influence, research, or knowledge, that's all I've got for you, because that's all I've learned, and that's all I can tap into. That's all I can provide. But if I were to make up a story about either genetically modified organisms or genetically modified food or things I had heard, that may or may not be entirely true. That may or may not be related to facts that can be trusted. So here are examples of where artificial intelligence, as we look at its transformation and its possibilities, begin. Now, Charity, April, McCoy, and I did our best to join you there in Nigeria in person. This is a screenshot that I posted today on LinkedIn, or yesterday on LinkedIn. It'll be your tomorrow when you watch this video. And I went ahead about 2.5 weeks or so before our planned trip to Nigeria. I put in my e-visa request to the Nigerian government. And about a week or week and a half later, we put in Charity's request. Teresa, I believe, put in her first request before I put in my first request. And then she put in Raymond's request sometime between my request and Charity's request. However, between the four of us, without spoiling Teresa's news, which I'll let her share with you in either her presentation or however she chooses to share, our experience was Charity's e-visa application was accepted. My e-visa application was denied. There were a couple things they wanted to see me change. I had requested that information. Hey, if there's anything else you need from me, please let me know. A day before our trip, my e-visa was still not approved. And so Charity and I had to make the hard decision of not joining you there in Nigeria in person, because it sounded like we either weren't going to be able to, or even if we were, the folks at the Nigerian embassy in Atlanta, Georgia, were telling us it's going to cost you, with no information about what that cost or what that additional assistance was going to be monetarily. So unfortunately, we had to make the very tough decision to not be there in person. However, because we're doing this with virtual capabilities, I am making a recording of the video and the topic of AI and its future. And then I will also attempt to join you online, real time, for the keynote and the opening on Saturday morning. Now, if we look at our agenda items for this discussion, we have the current state of AI and the use of and rise of agentic AI, agents that AI can utilize. We'll talk about AI in everyday life. I'll give you an example that I saw at our local grocery store. We'll look at the ethical and social implications of artificial intelligence. We'll look at AI and the economy, as well as future trends and predictions. Let's see if I can use my handy trigger for my Surface device here as my PowerPoint navigation. Now, one thing that Microsoft did years ago and hasn't updated probably in the last 10 to 15 years are future states of collaboration. About 15 years ago, I found a video on YouTube that I believe I've linked in the PowerPoint presentations, which I will provide to Timadayo, so you will have access to these. That future state of productivity, not necessarily artificial intelligence, relied on the state that Microsoft and the world was in at the time. So this retail demo was very humorous because it used a lot of assumptions over the types of devices we were carrying at the time, which were phones, maybe even before full smartphone and certainly full touch phone capabilities were introduced. In more future versions of that future video of productivity, Microsoft assumed that projection and the way we were interacting with these interfaces, whether they were still on tablet devices or clear devices that we could see through, like think about the windshield of a car. Some cars now can actually project navigation, speed, and information for the driver to the glass or the windshield so that you can see that transparently while you are driving. Well, today we have not only artificial intelligence in things like ChatGPT and Microsoft's Copilot, but we have the ability now for agents and for the AI to act on behalf of us to make these leaps between different AI services that we might have. So as opposed to me having to say, I'd like to create a placeholder for this slide with a picture, and then on top of that, I would like you to help me write some information about the current state of AI, I could ask an agent to do some of that work for me. And I'll give you a practical example that I have seen of something that I've had to take 3 or 4 steps personally to do and create an outcome that an agent or an agentic approach might be able to do for me in the future. Now, as we look at an overview of AI technologies, we have several different types of areas where artificial intelligence has been improved and was started from. Machine learning is the underpinning of artificial intelligence. Machine learning is where we allow the computer to learn, similar to how a human would learn by consuming information about a particular subject. So that could be languages, that could be how to draw, that could be information about healthcare or a specific industry. And then from there, we have the capability of AI to also interact with things like computer vision. The example from a local grocery store that I will share with you uses computer vision as a really large part of the solution. We have natural language processing. The fact that I can ask something and artificial intelligence can figure out what I'm asking is part of that natural language processing. In the past, you had to be very specific with computer requests, or the computer did not understand what you were asking. In the same way where maybe there's a word that I think of that I'm not 100% on how to spell, if I get at least in the neighborhood of the word, things like natural language processing can figure out what I am meaning. Same thing with autocorrect. We've all seen examples of autocorrect working to help us, and maybe examples of autocorrect gone either a little bit or a lot wrong. And then we also have robotics. The example in different industries, we talked about different things with healthcare, which are outlined here. We have finance, artificial intelligence in finance. There's a lot of things in finance that are model driven that might be predictable. Not 100% predictable, but at least getting us into the neighborhood of predicting those. We also have things in retail and entertainment. There's also recent advances and breakthroughs that we have seen within artificial intelligence. Things like deep learning innovations that have happened within the AI models that we're using. Obviously, in the last 2.5 or 3 years, after Microsoft introduced the Designer application, we've seen the Designer application go from some fairly rudimentary capabilities to much more advanced capabilities because of deep learning. Natural neural networks and their development also allow us to take advantage of things that have happened in this area. Image and speech recognition has gone from maybe taking the words that I speak in English and providing written transcripts of those words in another language, to Microsoft Teams being able to actively translate the English that I'm speaking to another language that you choose. And there's a couple different ways that we can do these types of things. Obviously, if I close caption this presentation, I choose a language for you to all view or be able to see. However, if I use a Microsoft PowerPoint online feature called PowerPoint Live, what I can do is put up a QR code or a URL that you can connect to, and you as the listener can decide whether you would like to see my English translated into Spanish, French, German, or another language of your choice as an individual person. So if I do translation and use something that's available on the screen, that translation decision is one-to-one. I have to decide I'm speaking English, and I'd like my audience to be able to read it in French if they speak French. Maybe the majority of my audience, that's the second most common language. So I can do that. The performance of AI tasks has also become much better. So the delay that I take with things like translation obviously relies on the speaking that I do, and then the translation either of the words that I spoke in English to English or the words that I spoke in English to another language. But as these have improved, we've got better capabilities there. So let's transition to AI in everyday life. In our homes, we have plenty of examples of things that AI has brought to us and has improved upon over time. Home automation is one example of this. Whether using an Alexa device, a Google device, an Apple device, when I say Alexa, I guess I mean Amazon, and then Apple and Google. So we're level setting on the companies that make those different devices or have those different automation capabilities. There are ways that our doorbells can talk to our security systems, that our thermostats can automatically make adjustments, maybe based on the time of day. If I'm away from my home from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., maybe I want to cool my home before I return in the evening. And maybe overnight, I want to set certain things to happen. I can do a lot with home automation. With AI personal assistants, I can also have playlists available, ask AI personal assistants information to look up things that I might be interested in. And with security, I can either monitor my home while I'm away, lots of different things that we can do from a home perspective. Now in the supermarket, you may have noticed all sorts of different ways that artificial intelligence is changing the way that we can communicate with each other and the efficiency for which we can do certain tasks. In an example that I saw in Indiana, similar to what you might see if you've ever used a grocery store that has implemented this solution, they had the produce area, so whether I was buying peppers or broccoli or bananas, watermelon, you name it, I could set that on a scale. But in the past, I had to tell the device what it was weighing, and then it had to have information about how much that item cost. So for instance, bananas might be sold by the pound at a particular price. So I had to identify that I've set some bananas on the scale, and if the bananas are sold by weight, they are weighed, and then the price is calculated. In this case, the solution had cameras that were able to identify what I had set on the scale. And so the rest of the information is already available to the machine through machine learning. It knows what I've set on the scale. It allowed me to make corrections, telling me, hey, it looks like you've set some jalapenos on the scale. Jalapenos cost this much per weight. This is how much they weigh, and therefore this is how much you owe. It would go ahead and print the ticket for me so that I could scan that at the register at checkout. A pretty easy, relatable example of bringing a lot of the things we talked about from artificial intelligence together to a solution that you could use. When we think about artificial intelligence in healthcare and medical applications, there are several different places that we could see AI improving the outcomes that we all see on a regular basis. Predictive analysis might be, and analytics might be one area where we could see these improvements. AI prediction, if I pull up my handy scribble capabilities, AI driven for the needs of improving health outcomes and anticipating patient care. So if I already see high blood pressure as an indication in a patient, maybe instead of waiting until that patient has hypertension and then eventually high blood pressure on a regular basis, maybe I do some predictive analytics and I provide that patient with things they could change to bring down the dangerous levels of blood pressure that they might be experiencing. Diagnostic tools. I just met with another Microsoft MVP, or most valuable professional, that was monitoring their glucose levels. And I thought, oh, maybe they have diabetes, one of the potential outcomes of high blood pressure, hypertension, these other types of medical situations. But with diagnostic tools, maybe I'm just measuring the glucose level and making adjustments to avoid spikes within the glucose in the blood. And then we also have personalized medicine. So obviously I'm different than other people, and maybe with AI, they can take a look at different things that are predictions or that are in my healthcare plan and make sure that I have a treatment plan that may differ from other people. So whether that is the types of sports and the type of physical activity I get, or whether that is taking into account the types of foods that I eat and the amount of the foods that I eat. I've lost about 50 pounds within the last 6 months. And I've done so by changing my eating habits, by changing the amount of exercise and the types of exercise that I do, and then also thinking about the time of day that I am eating. And with those 3 changes, I've made some really dramatic results in a very short amount of time, not having to resort to drugs or other methods of changing that through personalized medicine, or a personalized plan, if you will. As we think about transportation, AI has certainly made all sorts of changes from a standpoint of autonomous vehicles becoming a potential reality for the future. Now, I have a friend who owns a Tesla, and we are visiting because we had plans to travel to Nigeria. We are visiting North Carolina on the east coast of the US. And so we've, shared the same ocean that you have on the west coast of Africa by going to the east coast of the United States. And as part of using the autonomous vehicles, cars now can drive themselves. Well, I have a friend that had a Tesla that drives itself, and the Tesla and my friend got in a pretty serious car accident because the Tesla was in self-driving mode, and this friend was driving along very hilly and situations where you weren't able to see far enough ahead of you. Off of a hill coming around the top of the hill, my friend encountered a car that was stopped in the road. And because not only would the friend not have had the time to react and slow down and avoid a collision, the AI and the car were not able to avoid that collision. Now, in that case, when we think about revolutionizing transportation and making sensors and machine learning available, maybe one of the things that could have been taken into account is the fact that, hey, we're going up a hill and we're only able to observe situations that are so far in front of the car. How fast is the car moving? Now, the likelihood of that car being stopped right over a hill and not being moved off to the side are very, very low from a percentage perspective. But because that's a possibility, maybe AI could make some of those decisions for us and maybe try to make a more calculated choice on what the car's rate of speed should be in that particular case. Obviously, with safety and efficiency, there's always that trade-off too. If the car slowed down for every hilly, top of the hill that it was approaching, the trip length would be extended. But from an efficiency perspective, taking some of that into account and maybe making a decision somewhere in the middle may have made the accident that happened, even if it were unavoidable, maybe less serious because the car wasn't going as fast. Now, we also have ethical and social implications of AI to take into account. As we look at privacy and data security concerns, one of the things that AI relies on is data. And because of the fact that the data that we are protecting needs to be secured, we need to make sure AI is following this and taking into account the security of information. A lot of times data goes through a data life cycle. As a Microsoft Most Valuable Professional, I learn things from Microsoft that are extremely confidential. And they can be anywhere from extremely confidential for a short amount of time before Microsoft makes them known either worldwide or announces a particular product or change or something else, to maybe something that Microsoft doesn't plan to announce for either several weeks or months. Once that information becomes public, it becomes less of an issue who knows that information or who shares that information. One of the things that the Microsoft MVPs have dealt with from a privacy and data security concern perspective is third-party note-taking and AI apps. So Copilot is Microsoft's answer from a standpoint of artificial intelligence and its ability to help you maybe summarize a meeting or come up with outcomes from a meeting. There are a plethora of third parties that are doing something very similar. Many of these technologies or services plug in just like you were invited to a meeting by inviting themselves to the same meeting and joining remotely or digitally. In this case, one of the ways that Microsoft has combated this is to point out that part of the policy as an MVP is you will not take screenshots, you will not share information that you're not supposed to, and that you will not use any of these third-party artificial intelligence services to attend and summarize the meetings. Our privacy protection also becomes important in these situations. And not only is it important to protect privacy at the time of its being entered, but over the life cycle of the data. So there have been many situations where regulations have been put in place that require not only for companies to protect data from a privacy perspective, but to allow an individual to make changes to their decisions over the life cycle of that data. As both a Microsoft MVP, Most Valuable Professional, and an MCT, a Microsoft Certified Trainer, I make decisions about what Microsoft knows about me, can share about me, and what people publicly can search and find out about me. Because of some of these changes in regulations, many countries have decided, you know what, Dan may have made some decisions in the first place, but Dan should have the right to say, you know, right now I've decided for whatever reason, personal or otherwise, that I do not want any of my data shared publicly. I would like to erase that information that Microsoft once had certain permissions to share. And so by changing those, it allows the AI as well as the services that leverage that data to maybe revoke privileges for searching by my name or searching by a particular category that I choose not to share anymore. AI can also have issues with bias and fairness. One thing that I noticed with Microsoft Designer was a prompt that I used asking for a diverse set of individuals attending Microsoft Ignite in Chicago, Illinois. Microsoft Ignite 2024 was held in Chicago for the first time in 9 years. And so I asked for a diverse set of attendees or presenters. And what I was thinking about was, from my perspective, physical, maybe characteristics of the presenters that were drawn. I think I asked for it in a cartoon style. And so in the cartoon, I was expecting maybe males and females and different skin types. What I was not expecting that was delivered by Designer was an individual in a wheelchair. When I said diverse, I didn't necessarily give it particular diversity that I was looking for in the presenters or the attendees that were depicted in a comic style. I thought this was a great example of maybe that bias that I had not being inferred into the model, and the model itself giving me something that I didn't specifically request. But the fairness in AI, this is one example of maybe making sure that the language that we use and the things that are taken into account take into account more than what we might be thinking in the first place, unless we provide that specific in the prompt. If all I asked for was males and females, maybe things like ethnicity, skin color, hair length and color, eyes, glasses, other types of things from a clothing perspective might have just been inferred from the model and the training data that it was given. So we also have the impact on employment and the job market. One thing that I believe is going to be discussed this afternoon is what happens with jobs and job security as people are displaced from roles, either because of downsizing, because of any other reason. One thing that I have learned is that a lot of times taking um, different skills and putting them together in unique ways is one of the benefits that I offer to potential employers. So whether it's understanding AI and learning ways to use it and training people on how to use it and how to secure it and how to set up identity and other aspects of Microsoft services, I become a much more well-rounded candidate for a company to consider. The company that I will be starting with in July, that you'll learn more about on LinkedIn in July, was very, very impressed by the fact that not only did I know things for the job that I was being hired for, which is coordinating and supporting live events for their executives, but the fact that I had so much other experience in different areas of Microsoft and examples that I could use of places I had collaborated with other people, places that I had shared knowledge with other people, and places where I had implemented the technologies that we were speaking about. The fact that I had all of these examples and recent examples of several of these areas, including live events that I'm either producing for others or that I'm involved with as a presenter and potentially the producer of those events behind the scenes, was of a lot of interest to this employer that I'll be starting with in about a week. The emerging opportunities really present themselves because of these changes. These changes are coming so rapidly now that many of us, if we haven't started learning about AI and artificial intelligence, will be potentially behind people that have started using these technologies. And then we have adoption and reskilling opportunities. So if my job in the past was just clicking start and stop on a live event for a company, and the company figures out ways for AI to maybe infer when the event should start and when the event should end, maybe I need to step up and provide other types of skills to that particular organization. And that allows them to utilize me, both in the ways that they originally intended, but in new ways. As we look at AI and the economy, there are all sorts of things that AI has done in a relatively short amount of time for many of us. When Copilot was introduced, one of the promises and some of the initial examples were automations of tasks. Now, one thing that I typically enjoy doing with the live events that I host is the ability to give people the opportunity to join the live event before we're ready to start the live event. So imagine that before this keynote, which has been recorded because I'm not there in person and we may have issues with bandwidth, and we're given the opportunity to use this as a backup. One of the things that I might want to do is have a set of slides that are provided before we start playing the actual presentation. And maybe I want to have 60 slides that I can provide for the 60 seconds before the event actually starts, especially if it's going to be online or virtual. Maybe I want to have 15 minutes and 15 slides to let people know, hey, we're going to get started in 15 minutes. And then at 14 minutes, you have 14 minutes left. It's time to go get that last cup of coffee, wrap up that conversation with either a new friend or an existing colleague, because we're going to get started in only a few minutes. Once we get down to 5 minutes, maybe it's time for that last bio break or to grab that last cup of water, coffee, whatever you are planning to drink during the next hour. What I found out was that PowerPoint, at least with the prompts that I could think of to request, I want 15 slides, I want those slides to play every minute, and I want the slides to do a countdown from 15 to 1 minute, was not something that PowerPoint, at least based on the prompts I've been able to use or think of, to accomplish the 15 slides. So the innovative solution I came up with was that Excel does a really good job now of flash filling different information in columns. So I can very easily and quickly come up with a set of 15 columns that go from 15 to 1, and then another column that says we will get started in, and then 15 is in another column, and then maybe minutes is in a third column. And Excel has a feature called Flash Fill that allows it to say, I'd like to take the information in column A, which says we will get started in, column B, which says 15, and column C that says minutes, and I'd like to input that in column D. By doing so, I then have the ability to maybe take that into PowerPoint with a feature they call Outline. And the outline capability allows me to copy and paste information that then becomes separate slides. Now, in a very quick and efficient manner, I can say I need 15 slides or 60 slides for 60 minutes ahead of time or 60 seconds ahead of time. And it's very easy for me then to go into PowerPoint if I know PowerPoint really well and say I'd like these slides to appear for 1 minute or 1 second each. This allows me to streamline the operation of that from having to click on next 15 times, having to go to each individual slide to write, we will get started in a number that's changing, minutes. And that tedious work has now been streamlined quite a bit just by using artificial intelligence and using it in unique ways that weren't necessarily working the way it was designed or the way that I was requesting it to be designed. Now we can also look at new business models and opportunities. Microsoft saw Copilot as an opportunity to not only make these services available to enterprise customers, but to also make sure that those customers were committing to the services that were introduced with Copilot for Microsoft 365. As we look at different ways that Microsoft has made Copilot available, there are ways where everybody that uses a Microsoft service can get familiar with Copilot. If you go to copilot.microsoft.com or you download the Copilot app for the phone of your choice, there are ways for you to utilize this service without a subscription. If your company does not have Copilot for Microsoft 365, you can use Copilot Pro to get practical information about what this artificial intelligence and service can provide in applications like PowerPoint and Excel, Word, and Outlook. And then as we look at data-driven enterprises, the data that we have available can now be utilized in much more efficient ways by teams across the company. And the market opportunity for transformation becomes pivotal. The example that I used of that grocery store retailer that was able to more efficiently provide the ability for people to purchase fresh produce may mean an increase in produce purchases from that retailer. When we think about the regulatory and the legal frameworks here, we have the accountability in AI and the fact that as it becomes more autonomous and we need to establish accountability for the actions taken, we have an opportunity to make sure that AI is more accountable, and in the same way that we are accountable as the people producing information today, or speaking information, writing information, communicating information. Liability concerns and copyright could also be things that we have from a regulatory and legal perspective. Liability in these situations might be related to the music that's used, or copyright infringement from a liability perspective. And then compliance challenges could be the simple things like making sure information is only available to the people that should have access to it, but it could be more complex examples, such as what happens when I summarize data in the future. Has that data that I summarize, maybe in a different view in a data warehouse or by consolidating information, is it either aggregated in such a way that the security and compliance concerns go away, or am I properly still securing that information only to the people that should have access to it? As we look at future trends and predictions, advancements in machine learning and deep learning allow us to take a look at sophisticated AI systems. When we look at some of the things that agentic AI has brought forth, we have the ability to now offload complete tasks instead of just offloading specifics within tasks. So for instance, if I'm planning a trip to Nigeria, as an example, maybe in the future, AI has the ability to say, Dan, I got you. Let's make sure we get those plane tickets that were part of the e-visa application requirements secured so that we can put in the e-visa requests. Let's follow up on the e-visa requests. Let's make sure that the other information that the airline needs are provided in a timely fashion. Let's put together follow-up points to make sure that the embassy that needs to approve the visa does so well in advance of the actual trip. And any other types of things related to the trip that need to be thought of, like vaccinations. Fortunately, the vaccinations that both Charity and I received are good for several years into the future. So although we're not able to join you there to discuss sophisticated AI systems, the hope is we are able to join you in person at some point in the future, there in Lagos, Nigeria. As we look at complex data, much of the information that was requested for the e-visa application was pretty complex in nature. It was things like pictures, passport-sized pictures. Well, obviously, if I'm providing digital copies of passport pictures, the question about the size of the picture, other than square, like a passport would have in the photo, are not necessarily communicated in that request. The fact that the passport photo size had to be under 1 megabyte meant the file quality could not be extremely high, but maybe high enough to keep the size of the file under 1 megabyte. And then autonomous task performance. In this case, maybe taking that end-to-end process through the different approvals or processes that needed to happen. As we look at other integrations. AI, or artificial intelligence, also has implications from an Internet of Things perspective. The amount of signals that we are getting in both our personal and professional lives is unprecedented. The amount of information that even just one car is now producing, especially as those cars have electric capabilities and autonomous facilities on board, becomes lots of information that is being provided. Even something as simple as an example of my phone. My phone has an AI capability that in many cases requires the phone to connect to the internet. Well, I know Apple, as one of the examples that I'm aware of, has worked on what Apple Intelligence can do when it's offline. Imagine being on a plane where I've had to put my phone into airplane mode because I'm flying to Nigeria. And the fact that I have an 11.5-hour flight, which was what was planned to get from Atlanta, Georgia to Lagos, Nigeria. Well, even in airplane mode, and if I had chosen not to purchase the internet package on the plane or turn on the Wi-Fi, my phone should still be able to do things like issue a command to set an alarm for maybe 6 hours into that flight, about halfway through the flight, or set an alarm for 10 hours, maybe so I'm aware that the flight is probably close to being over. And maybe there are things that I want to do before we are required to take our seats for landing. Lots of different examples of Internet of Things and tying these together. With AI and blockchain, lots of combinations and examples of where we might want to enhance security, transparency, and trust from a data management perspective. A lot of the things I think about from an AI perspective, especially with security, are the ways that security has changed from just simple passwords to much more complex passwords, to how often those passwords should be changed, to even ways of getting us out of the password business altogether from a security perspective. Other ways to confirm my identity besides my email address and a password. And then we also have innovative solutions. There are services that I use on the internet that have never requested me to set up a password. However, for the last 20 plus years that I've been connected to the internet, there are hundreds of thousands of services that I have either signed up for, utilized for a particular amount of time, or that have potentially been compromised. And so that combination of whatever I used as an email address at the time and a particular password that I chose are out there in a compromised situation. Innovative solutions are things like maybe my phone being able to tell me it appears that you're using a compromised password on this service or website. Maybe those can be blocked in the future. Maybe in the future we can use better ways of confirming that it's me accessing my data. And then as we look at the future applications and scenarios, there are so many examples of human and AI collaboration. Things as simple as LinkedIn being able to assist me with the somewhat tedious task of going through everybody that has a birthday. I have over 11,000 connections on LinkedIn. If you do just some of the raw math there, even if a certain number of those connections have shared their birthday and month with me, I can have anywhere from 10 to 50 people that I need to wish a happy birthday to on any particular day. And by doing that as a message, it means I have to send one message to each of those individuals. Wouldn't it be nice if I could just say, hey, LinkedIn, maybe with a natural language request, could you send everybody in my network that has a birthday today an individualized message? LinkedIn already knows what their names are. It already knows that their birthday is today. And instead of having me go in to say happy birthday, happy birthday, happy birthday to all those people, maybe it's able to say happy birthday to the person's name. Maybe it's able to wish them something else. LinkedIn also has the ability to do customized messages back to people. So one thing that I do when I typically set up the happy birthday messages to people is I may consider customizing the automatic message or auto reply that LinkedIn uses when they say thank you or they follow up with me, providing them information about what I'm doing, maybe events that I'm speaking at, etc. When we look at autonomous cities, there are things that Chicago is doing that allow smart infrastructure. We've talked about self-driving vehicles. I've seen kiosks at several places on the travels that we've done somewhat recently on food service. Instead of people queuing up in lines, maybe a food service kiosk uses lockers, an efficient way of delivering information other than just a text message or an announcement that order 53 is now ready. Space exploration is another example. And then environmental conservation, the types of things we can do by automating some of these signals, even things as simple as not cooling a building that we live in or a room that we live in or that we use when we're not in the room to be using it. Microsoft's thinking about things like the data centers and ways to be much more green in their data center use. Why do we have lights turned on in a data center? If we're not physically in those areas, are lights really necessary? And so in conclusion, we're very sorry that we're not able to be there with you in person, but I hope you've enjoyed this talk about some of the things that AI will transform in our lives, both now and in the not too distant future. I look forward to when Microsoft takes that crystal ball and starts imagining what AI and our productivity and our work and personal lives might look like in 5 to 10 years into the future. The ethical considerations are something that we are addressing today, and that by making sure we have diverse views and opinions provided into these solutions, we can avoid bias and other types of outcomes that might cause us issues in the future. The positive outcomes that we have from AI far outweigh the concerns that we have, especially if we put together the frameworks to address those. Just like going to a movie might have indications for you about what genre the movie is, what the subject of the movie is, a synopsis of what's going to happen in the movie, and its rating. Can I bring my children to this movie? Should I be expecting maybe harsh language, violence, a fictitious story, or a true story? All of that information allows you to make a much better decision about whether you want to see the movie or not. It's up to each of us individually if we stay at a movie. I've heard a lot of people that have gone to a movie and have walked out of the movie, either because of the subject matter, because the movie was moving too slow. And as we move to different ways of consuming entertainment, it's very easy to just turn off a movie if you're not interested, if it's moving too slow, if you need to take a break We started a movie today with the friends that we're visiting, and we'll likely finish that movie, hopefully before you all start on Saturday morning your time. Thank you so much for paying attention. And again, I look forward to joining you in Nigeria in the future. And thanks to Timidayo, Rookie, my fellow presenters, for all the hard work that you have done to make today a success. Feel free to connect on LinkedIn. I will likely create a final slide here to share what my LinkedIn is with all of you.